All right, peace. It's Bronzebird here with another video. Before I begin, like and subscribe. Thank you. So, you know, why I'm laughing is because I find it so ironic that the dynamics kind of change this day and age when it comes to the midterm election and, you know, more or less when it comes to focusing on so-called Black people. The discussion now rears into vilifying the so-called Black man, then just trying to understand why the Black man is not interested in voting like he once did. And so the reason why I view this as very important is because we have the woman, Stacy Abrams, who's supposed to be going against, I believe, the governor, Kemp. I forgot his name, but Mr. Kemp, I'm going to call him. And then when it comes to the Senate, we have two so-called Black men, which is Raphael Warnock, and he's going against Herschel Walker. So I thought the dynamic was pretty cool, and the idea that, I think it's definitely dope to see so-called Black men, go for the election and, figure out this whole political stuff. And, the so-called Black woman, standing where she is as governor, going against the so-called white man, Kemp. But one of the things that I raised an issue or a concern with me is that when the narrative comes in about how she's not able to reach so-called Black men, now it becomes the blame, like so-called Black men just don't want to vote. You don't care, you don't care, you don't care. Or the fact matter that they're daring to go to the different party, the Republicans, and now they're looked at wrong because they want to go ahead and say, we're tired of being Democrats, we want to go to another party. In my opinion, I tell people all the time, I'm apolitical. I don't care for Democrats. I don't care for Republicans. All of them is playing the same game. It's just that the narrative that's being scripted about both parties is different. It's heads or tails. Heads could be Republicans, tails could be Democrats. So you got to know exactly what you're dealing with out here and what's going on. And especially with so-called Black people, we've been sold that pipe dream for a long time, that we should be in a Democratic Party. Now, these days, a lot of people is waking up and saying, well, what is the Democratic Party really doing for us? They bring a lot of these issues, but what change comes forth out of this? Nothing. So, and that's not to say that political parties, there aren't people out there that really want to do the right thing, or certain people who want to be invited into going into the White House or different positions within the government are not going to try to put forth any strategies or make any things happen. But there's so many reasons, there's so many solutions to that, especially when it comes to so-called Black community, if they want to, better themselves and better their conditions, especially if it comes to something like poverty and stuff like that. So I'm going to show you on my screen something I find ironic. I'm going to be playing a couple of videos in which I'll give my viewpoints about things that I think, because good old Al Sharpton later, what you're going to see in this, he made a very, very crazy statement that had me thinking, wow, this is what you're doing to kind of just bully so-called Black men into voting for Stacey Abrams? This is what we doing now? Like, this is so crazy to me. But let's just play this 47-second video, and then we're going to read a little bit, and I'll give my thought process towards this. So, Pete.
Women of their right to choose, their right to decide their medical future. We do not believe in investigating miscarriages as criminal acts. We do not believe in physicians hesitating in ectopic pregnancies for risk of 10 years in prison. We do not believe that you can say with one breath that you care about the lives of women and deny them access to the very healthcare that could make carrying a healthy baby to term possible. Under this law, and under Brian Kemp's refusal to expand Medicaid, many of those women will never have a chance to see a doctor until it's too late. Not only too late to know what is wrong, but too late to do anything about what they learn. And so while he has done a small thing, we have a massive issue in Georgia. We are.
So that's obviously talking about the whole thing in my belief system, talking about the abortion rights. Obviously, it says it right here on your screen. We're going to get to the whole entire thing about what's the results so far with the election. She's losing right now, about 8 to 10% when it comes to it. But let's just read a little bit about this article right now. I'm going to read this whole entire paragraph here and then leave the article in this section in case you want to read it more. With just weeks remaining before the anticipated midterm elections in November, Democrat Stacy Abrams is still trailing in new polling that offers a potential bleak outlook for her chances to beat Brian Kemp in a rematch with the Republican governor. A new Atlanta Journal-Constitution Georgia News Collaborative survey released Wednesday showed Kemp leading with 51% of support compared to Abrams' 41%. Another 6% of poll respondents were undecided, while 2% said they backed Libertarian candidate Shane Hazel. Abrams was running against Kemp in the race of Georgia's gubernatorial seat for the second time after losing to the Republican in 2018 by less than 2 percentage points. Despite her close brush with victory years ago, which would have made her the first Democrat to hold the office since 2003, additional recent polling indicates that Abrams may not win her second matchup with Kemp. And so, look, listen, I'm not here to make fun of Stacy Abrams. I'm mainly here to get to the point that it's very funny about all these like policies and all these, no, not policies, all these people coming into place to reel up this whole entire Democratic thing, especially when they get behind the backing of a so-called Black woman. Because why are they going so hard about saying, hey, vote for Stacey Abrams, vote for Stacey Abrams? When you have even the Senate, I don't even feel like they protest that hard about voting, at least for the Democratic Senate, for the brother Warnock versus Herschel Walker, since people have a problem with Herschel Walker because he still has his alliance with Trump. So I mean, I see two sides of the story on this, and I want to get to this whole entire video with Al Sharpton, in which he says men are insecure if they aren't proud of Stacey Abrams. Why did Al Sharpton say that? Al Sharpton, Mr. Man out there, Mr. Slick Back Hair, out there sitting up there talking about your beloved Stacey Abrams and saying men are insecure. But look at the narrative that's being pushed here about getting at the men, not getting at the women for what it is that you don't even know. There might be women out there that say, hey, I don't want to vote for Stacey Abrams. I want to go for Kemp. But the thing about it is the narrative is always going to be pushed to make the men look bad. And this is not about complaining, because I do believe men, if you really are secure about the state you live in and you really want to make change, and you really feel like voting is something you should do, then yeah, you should vote. But why is it that Al Sharpton decided to go the way of vilifying the men instead of just saying, just get out there and vote? Why did it become a whole entire conversation about how men need to sit up there and stop being so insecure about Stacey Abrams? Why is that? Let's watch this video together.
I literally have Black men calling my radio show saying, well, we've got enough Black women in power. You know, Ketanji Brown Jackson in the Supreme Court. We have Vice President Kamala Harris. I don't know if I want to vote for Stacey Abrams. Who would not be proud of Stacey Abrams unless you're so insecure as a man that you feel that you've got to be manipulated by probably some provocateur?
But notice that he was talking about how women said that women were sitting up there saying that there's enough so-called Black women in a lot of these political positions. Why did it go ahead and sit up there gearing at the man for sitting up there saying you're insecure, manipulation, and all these different things? Why did the narrative go there? It makes no sense to me that was because certain people ain't feeling Stacey Abrams. Don't try to manipulate so-called Black men, especially with your bullshit ad, no voting, no vucking, and then sit up there saying that we are highly responsible when it comes to this whole entire thing if we ain't feeling the politician Stacey Abrams. Why is it not the same thing that they should be doing for the two so-called Black men that's running for Senate in Georgia? That's why it's very important to look at these stories sometimes, because it tells you the world that's going in. That the liberal so-called Black man will attack the so-called Black man that has a conscience and doesn't want to deal with the same BS that he's been dealing with for decades, especially when it comes to the Democratic race. It does not matter that it's a so-called Black man. I mean, so-called Black woman. So let's read the article. MSNBC host Reverend Al Sharpton claimed on Monday that men were insecure if they did not want to vote for Democratic candidate Stacy Abrams in the Georgia gubernatorial election. Sharpton appeared as a guest on Morning Joe discussing the potential impact of the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe versus Wade on the upcoming midterm elections. While one guest, All In Together founder Lori Leader, refers to the decision as a case to undermine democracy by limiting women's rights, Sharpton suggested that misogyny ran deeper than that. The thing that speaks to me from what you are saying is I'm hearing it both in the faith community and the Black community. Misogyny becoming more acceptable. I literally have Black men call my radio show saying, well, we got enough Black women in power. You know, Ketanji Brown Jackson in the Supreme Court. We have Vice President Kamala Harris. I don't know if I want Stacey Abrams. All right. I apologize for earlier because I guess I thought he said women when he was saying what he said. I overheard it. I thought he said women. But you know, here we go, continue with this. Sharpton then pivoted to attacking these alleged callers for feeling so insecure as a man that they oppose Abrams. Now, with that being said, obviously you see right here in this section right here, it says Stacey Abrams claims on CNN she's never denied the outcome of the 2018 election. Now, that was picked up by so-called Black men, I believe on the same network, that said that Stacey Abrams decided not to concede when she lost the election in 2018. Now, I ain't gonna really go into that, you know what I'm saying? But I do know about that situation that happened. Who would not be proud of Stacey Abrams unless you are so insecure as a man that you feel that you've got to be manipulated by probably some provocateurs or the faith community that I don't believe in women's rights to choose women out to be subordinate, not leading. Did you read the Bible and forget the book of Esther and Ruth? Oh, okay. Did they edit that out of your Bible? It's becoming disgusting. And I mean, look, man, the whole entire thing that's going on in today's society in which they're starting to understand what's going on with the psychosis of so-called Black man, they're starting to understand the so-called Black man is tired. He's not taken seriously. He's not taken into account when it comes to these elections. Now it's being viewed that he is only being valued for his sexual prowess more than his actual thinking. Undermine him by saying, if you vote for us, we'll give you sex in exchange for that. And this is a classical example of weaponizing sex against the man. So that only thing that the man cares about is sex. They don't care about what policy he sees, what stuff that he needs as a man to survive in his country, because everybody knows the so-called Black man is dead bottom when it comes to how he's treated in this society. But this is the famous old clip that I wanted to review that a lot of people on YouTube reviewed. So I give my spin on it, especially as we watch this famous guy over here give his opinion on things. So Pete.
Strategy to target those individuals because it comes down to numbers. Warnock beat Kelly Loeffler by less than 100,000 votes. And so if you're the Democratic Party and you're just ignoring these numbers, what did Terrence just say? You are ignoring the potential to win. You should be trying to get every vote. And I'm just going to go ahead and put it out here because someone has to say it. The fundamental problem with the Democratic Party is that white strategists are controlling the money, are controlling the strategy.
Yeah.
Yes, African Americans.
As always. I don't disagree with nothing that brother just said. As always, they're always gonna have the highest seat at the table for controlling how everything is gonna go, especially with these ad campaigns in the midterm elections, and then what happened in 2020 about getting people out to vote and the direct disrespect that they've given these people money to sit here and talk about having women be more sexualized in these elections for ad campaigns than actually saying, hey, what could we actually do to listen to so-called Black men so we can encourage them to vote? What is the policies that they want to see? How do they want things to work for them? Instead, it was like, okay, let's go ahead and get strippers, or let's go ahead and start teasing the idea of sex to the so-called Black man's subconscious So he's rewarded with that after he votes.
Are having input, but if you're trying to win, you better listen to Black people. You better fund these initiatives. Otherwise, you're going to lose, and that gap is going to widen.
But then again, especially read on the title, Black men can play a critical role in Georgia elections. So wouldn't it be in the best interest of these politicians to listen to what so-called Black men have to say, not automatically throw their opinions in the trash because of the fact of the matter that they're so-called Black men? Has anybody ever gotten to the point why so-called Black men don't want to vote? Like, that's the whole entire thing that I've always tried to understand, if that's ever been a real big conversation. Now, it's been reported in another video that Stacy Abrams has gone out to talk to so-called Black business owners, so-called Black men, to, you know, figure out how, you know, she could become more of a better ally so that she can help get those votes for her election. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's true. It's been documented. I'm not going to deny of that. But it seems as if the real biggest problem is the so-called Black man offers pushback when it comes to the midterm elections, offers pushback when it comes to how he's not heard and he's ignored. And then automatically, the so-called Black women correspondents on this network, or others that is, liberal so-called Black men too, will look at the so-called Black men who offers to push back and say, your voice doesn't matter. But why are you complaining? Oh, you're complaining about that? That doesn't matter. That's the whole entire thing I get from these conversations.
Fund candidates. Instead of meddling around in Republican elections, trying to put one over the other because you think they're easier to beat.
Yeah.
Fund candidates.
But also off-year strategies.
Right.
You can't come talk to Black men in the middle of September. Yeah. Election is November. And I called it. They should have been doing this in January after Biden got inaugurated.
I agree. And I think that would have been an important strategy because we're not stupid. See, that's the problem that a lot of these politicians think that they're going to do. They think that they're going to be able, and especially we picked this bullshit up for decades now. Every time it comes to the elections, when do you see them wanting to do what they do? Around September, the fall time. You know, you don't really hear anything over the summer. Loosely, you hear something by August. But when it comes down to crunch time, when it comes down to pressure, September, you can expect them to sit up there and try to be like, well, Black people, let me hear for you. Playing you like a sucker. And especially when it comes to so-called Black men, trample over us or every chance y'all get. And the thing about it is, if y'all really was y'all in P's and Q's, you would have had a strategy in order to try to get so-called Black men to at least think that you're not full of shit after the inauguration of Joe Biden. But you know, people out there still voting for Joe Biden or supporting Joe Biden. If you don't vote for Joe Biden, you ain't Black. So I guess I ain't so-called Black then.
Build up a program so when elections come, now you properly prep.
Yeah.
AKA build a rapport. That's the main thing that was missing out this conversation. Build a rapport. Because we know when it comes to politicians, they don't give a shit. But at least if you build up a rapport to make me feel like you're gonna fuck me over, that at least tells me you care just a little bit. You understand?
Invest in Black media, brother. We know that.
Black-owned media, not Black
media.
targeted.
Black-owned media.
Absolutely.
Cliff, listen, I think Roland made a really legitimate point here. I will say, you know, a lot of Black men sometimes feel like they're ignored or they're put down.
It ain't even sometimes. It's most of the time we feel like we're ignored, and we're starting to understand things is not on our side. And so when the pushback comes in, a woman like this is going to go ahead and mention, because I know she did, she's going to mention all these different things about now these radical groups out here, so-called Black men going to the Republican Party, and then mentioning the beloved so-called manosphere that's on YouTube and all these other places where so-called Black men may release some type of hatred or vitriol towards the so-called Black woman's attitude. But this is all a job, and this is why the networks behind the scenes know how to do this. This is probably one of the main reasons why that bullshit network Fox Soul got implemented.
Particularly sometimes even by Black women in the media. So this is not that. But I do hear Roland's point that felt ignored. But you feel ignored, and then you go over to the other side. The oppressed feel oppressed. So then you go and try to align with the oppressor. So
you see what's funny about that narrative? What's very funny about that narrative is that they try to entice the so-called Black men for saying, hey, I don't think the Democrats is helping me. So let me go to the Republican side. And the so-called Black woman with the dog leash around your neck, so-called black man, is making you feel bad for sitting up there wanting to go over to the Republican side, as if you're wrong for sitting up there going over to the Republican side. But hey, it's your choice. But you see how the narrative is being pushed now. The oppressive, so we never say the Democrats is the oppressors, but we want to say the Republicans are. That's what we're going with this. SMH.
I'm not putting black men down, but sometimes it's like, well, some of you Kevin Samuels following Tariq Nasheed quoting people, please look at the truth and see what's happening and get in line with some of the black women. Is majority, like he said, vote Democrat, but that margin of people who can be plucked away from your people and go advance policies that harm your people, I just don't understand that.
See how they had to mention the late Kevin Samuels and Tariq Nasheed as a way to being these voices for so-called black men who is fed up with the treatment that they have in America and feel like the so-called black woman is against them. You see what that woman just did there? You see that, right? Why, like, see, the thing about it is that those are quotable men in order to rear in their argument to say that so-called black men is being completely led by these type of men to give their opinion on why they don't want to be involved in the Democratic race, why they feel like the so-called black woman is not with them, and all these different things, as if there aren't all more black men this day and age who starting to understand where they seat is at in this society, right on the floor, waiting for a dog biscuit. But this so-called black woman is so disappointed in hearing what you guys have to say. She has no problem with seeing what's going on in media and say, you know what, that's it. That's what black men listen to. They hate us. So now you understand that the gender war that Fox is bringing up in MSNBC is going to have more of these conversations in order to go ahead and make it more of a battle royale against the genders.
Yeah, and you've got three things that wind up happening. And first, let me shout out, as Roland mentioned, his Alpha Phi Alpha shirt. We've got a program where we reach out to Divine Nine, and AFI has been one of the organizations that was most aggressive at getting involved, like answering the call and reaching out to black men to mobilize voters back in 20 and 20.
No. The Divine Nine, though that whole entire reckless, that's the first stop when it comes to going ahead and reaching about so-called black people. The Divine Nine will always be the first stop. You understand that? Where they always are going to gear up and prep up so-called black leaders, which they're prepping up for the next generation, to have so-called black leaders to keep going back and forth between the elite and go with so-called black community. They're the gatekeepers. That's why you're able to have all these people talk all this nonsense all day long, because the Divine Nine is in charge of that. So this brother sitting up there saying that you thankfully, thank you so much. And look at what this title says for him. Co-founder of the Black Voters Matter Fund. Now, my thing about it is, like I said, he just basically alluded to exactly who's more important when it comes to the outreach of so-called black people. The Divine Nine will always be like that.
We expect to do the same this year. But to your question, you see 2 or 3 different possible responses when you've got this issue about black men and to what extent we feel ignored and to what extent the candidates in the party are addressing our issues. One is that we just stay home, right, which is what you were kind of talking about. The other is that we actually come out and we vote for the opponent who we know isn't doing us any good, right? In this case, that would be voting for Kemp. But there's this other option, and that's what some of these polls are getting at, is that you see some that are like, oh yeah, I'm gonna come out, I'm gonna vote for Warnock. But in that gubernatorial race, I'm not really feeling Stacy Abrams or Kemp, right? And some of them will be honest. I've been in conversations with men, and some of it is faith-based. I've been in conversations with brothers that say, I just don't think a woman should be governor, right? I don't think.
In which that comes into what they're gonna say is the conservative view, in which you already see this so-called black woman right now is disappointed. She had time to go ahead and sit on this. She was like, I can't believe that. We shouldn't have a woman in office. Like, look, the misandry, the misogyny, whatever you want to call it, the misogyny that is, it's a whole big different rabbit hole when it comes to it. And now they always say that the so-called black man is more conservative than the so-called black woman. And I think because so-called black men, no offense, really does see the bullshit that I come with a lot of different things that's being led in this society. But also the so-called Black man understands the so-called Black woman is the face of the so-called Black community. So-called Black man isn't. So-called Black man is made to be look like the bitch in this society. The so-called Black woman is more stronger than the so-called Black man. That's how it's made to seem in this society.
A Black woman should be governed. I don't think they were made to be. I have had that conversation, but then you also get this other conversation from somebody who's like, oh, I don't know what it is about, it's just something, and they won't just come out and say what the issue is. So I think part of this is on the candidates to address our issues. And Stacy Abrams has a piece of her platform that specifically speaks to issues that Black men care about. Roland mentioned a couple of them. And we care about economic stability, entrepreneurialism, all that. We care about police violence. So she has that in her agenda, but part of this isn't, we have to be honest, isn't going to be about her and her efforts and her policy to address our issues. There's a conversation that we've got to have.
And in my opinion, when it comes to these like races, even though I believe, politics, there is definitely some things in politics that range true and is good to have a conversation about. But if you really want to know, to get to so-called Black men, you got to try better than that. Because there's a lot of issues that the so-called Black men is getting at or in that more than likely is just being seen as we're complaining. No one cares what you think. You're not important. Go on about your way. You're dusty. You're this, you're that. Instead of trying to understand exactly where the so-called Black man is coming from, his subconscious, his psychosis and everything that he thinks is just being ignored. So, especially the midterm election, I hope humbles a lot of politicians in which they think about the so-called Black man. And maybe, just maybe, you reel it back into not trying to wait until September to go out and go pressure yourself into trying to understand how to get the vote, especially when it comes to so-called Black men. Should have tried harder. That's what you should have tried in January to build up that rapport, but you didn't. Tell me what you think in the comment section. All right, peace.